Welcome to Bill Russo's Short Story Theater. This is Zoe Chianti speaking. Today's story has not happened yet, and it may not ever happen, but we think it will. It is a tale of the invasion of Earth by gas creatures from the gas planets Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. We call that group of gas planets the June's Federation. Before we start today's tale, let's go to the state of Maine and the University of Science, where we will hear from Professor Anton Arbach, who recently revealed the existence of the gas creatures of the June's planets. After we hear from the professor, we are going to take you to the top of Ragged Mountain. It is the highest mountain in Maine. The only structure on the flat top of Ragged Mountain is the building housing the studios of WXJR Radio. A disc jockey named Red Flag is on duty. He has the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. until 3 o'clock in the morning. He has seen something very strange. Stay tuned for his report after the introduction by the professor.
Along the starway of infinity, there are millions of planets just like Earth. We need not be concerned with them. There are, however, many billions more that are not like Earth. These represent the biggest threat to humankind. A slow-moving, fragile, rudimentary craft from the United States pierced the murky atmosphere of Jupiter on July 4, 2036. Strange cries, shouts, and howls were captured by the ship's aural detectors. The voices, if indeed they were voices, were not made by carbon-based life forms. The space agency quickly issued reports that derided the cries as nothing more than some sort of interference or radio static. The collective mind of Earthlings, however, is beginning to grasp the concept of intelligent life that is not carbon-based. Such life forms may not even appear to be life forms to the primitive brains of the Homo sapien. Many of the beings are so different from humans that they could not survive on an H-con planet, one based on hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen. Conversely, the humans could not exist on planets like the gas giants, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, known as the Junes. Superior intelligence is likely among the creatures of the June's Federation. They doubtless recognize humans as sentient beings, but most certainly regard Earth creatures as cosmic babies. What if the gasmen of the icy giants decide to inhabit planet Earth? How would they be able to adapt to an H-con orb? Perhaps the invasion would start with a single icy gasman. He might land his frosty ship on top of a frozen mountain. The story might unfold in a manner similar to the invasion of Ragged Mountain as told by a disc jockey spending a solitary winter in an isolated dwelling on the flat top of a frigid mountain several hundred miles north of Montreal.
I'll tell you right up front that it is impossible. I am more isolated here than an astronaut in space. Nobody could have gotten up Ragged Mountain in the coldest and snowiest winter in a half-century. And yet, as I sit before you now and see your disbelief, I tell you it did happen. It was 5 minutes before midnight. I remember the time exactly because I was giving the weather report which we always broadcast at 11:55 p.m., just before the news. The weather forecast for all of northern Maine calls for more snow and a continuation of the extreme cold that has set records, all the way from Bangor to Caribou. The overnight low will scrape the bottom of the thermometer at 20 below zero with a wind chill of -60. Residents are advised to stay indoors. The area police departments and National Guard troops are standing by to assist residents with heating problems. People in difficulty should call 911 statewide, except for customers of the Fort Kent Telephone Company, who are advised to dial operator. Extra workers are on duty. Shelters have been set up in high schools and in the various campuses of State College. WNMR meteorologist Jack Hamilton says that the record cold wave will continue for at least the next 7 to 10 days, before any chance of moderation. The current temperature outside our studios, atop Ragged Mountain, is -12, with a further drop of 8 degrees expected overnight, to bring the temperature at dawn down to -20 below zero. Stay tuned for the national news from NBC Radio, which will be followed by your local and regional news, brought to you as always, by your local electric utility, the main public service company. A verified temperature of -50 was recorded in Aroostook County in 2009. The previous record cold temperature in the county was at Van Buren, where it was -48. The state of Maine, besides being the most northerly of all the 48 states, is the coldest and snowiest. The automated system kicked in after I gave the weather. It was programmed to play a few minutes of commercials followed by the network news feed. This gave me 8 free minutes, which I usually used to prepare my local newscast and bolt down a cup of strong coffee. My show runs from 10 p.m. to 3 o'clock in the morning, the graveyard shift. I gazed out the studio's picture window and watched the snow swirl around the 5 telephone poles that are strung around the tiny flat top of Ragged Mountain. The poles are lit up like Christmas trees, with large halogen street lamps arcing out from the top, like long steel arms. Smaller marker lights, behind square protective cases, run down the pole at 2-foot intervals, stopping at a distance of 4 feet from the ground. Each pole is the same. An amber light is first in line, a green light follows, then a red, and finally a blue. The sequence is repeated until the illumination reaches the big light at the top. In winter, I use the markers to gauge the depth of the snow. That night I reported that the snow had just reached the red light, meaning that there were 8 feet of frozen precipitation on the ground. The first telephone pole is just a few feet beyond the studio, which is part of this cabin that also serves as living quarters for the announcer. As you well know, during the winter months no earthly vehicle has the capability of navigating the winding, steep 5-mile road that spirals around Ragged Mountain. Whoever takes the graveyard shift also has to live in the cabin by himself, in isolation for the entire winter. During the day the radio station operates from studios and offices located in town, but at the start of my shift, the programming switches to here, the site of the transmitter, atop one of the largest mountains in the eastern United States. Though we have a nighttime signal of only 5,000 watts, it reaches all of northern Maine as well as parts of several other states and a few provinces in Canada. I have a large audience, and if mail were able to be delivered, I would have received anywhere from a few dozen to 100 cards and letters a week. The correspondence goes to the station, where they save it for me until June when the roads open up. You have probably heard my show. The music that I play is eclectic, ranging from folk performers like Pete Seeger to country performers such as Merle Haggard, as well as some jazz classics by Stan Kenton, Bill Russo, and Dave Brubeck, along with selected pieces from my personal extensive collection of hit 45 RPM vinyl records from the 1950s on. The second illuminated pole is in the parking lot, which has 4 spaces. Only one was occupied. That, by my car, currently buried a few feet below the crusty surface of the snow and ice. No attempts are ever made to shovel or plow anything on this little mountain tabletop that is home to the transmitter, as well as the cabin that houses the studio, and 2 attached supply buildings. I peered out the window that night and tried to look up, beyond the pole into the sky, but just above the light of the lamp, it was as if there were a ceiling fabricated of solidified, dark clouds. The storm was intensifying. I lost sight of the pole in the parking lot by my car and could barely see the one right next to the window, due to the thick, speeding, wind-blasted snowflakes. I felt a chill, though the room was warm. I started to look away, when unbelievably, I spied something that looked like a shaggy ape, walking towards the window. With vision clouded by a thick wall of driven snow obscuring the light from the halogen lamp, I observed that the thing advancing slowly on top of the frozen snow was huge. When it paused at the illuminated pole just outside the window, its head was well above the blue light on the pole. That marker lamp is up 16 feet. Discounting the snow on the ground, it meant that the creature was probably as high as the basketball hoops in the gym at the University of Maine. In Fort Kent, that's 10 feet. Picking up the telephone to contact the police department, I was midway through punching in the numbers when I realized the phone was dead. I checked my transmitter meters to make sure the radio station was still on the air. It was. A tapping at the window froze me before I could think of what to do next. Because the snow was so deep, the thing at the window had to kneel in order to be able to see inside. I realized then that the fur it was encased in was no more than a very heavy type of Arctic overcoat with an expansive hood that obscured much of the face of the improbable visitor. I could tell now that I had been mistaken about his height. He was probably no more than 6 feet tall. Reaching inside his coat, the man withdrew a square of cardboard with large printed letters. The sign said, "Please help." My chopper went down. "Let me in." I hadn't heard a helicopter, though with the howl of the wind, it's unlikely that I would have been able to hear one. It's also improbable that a chopper could have safely landed on the mountain during a blizzard. But there he was, outside my window, with his breath coming out in ragged gasps that turned to icy vapor as they hit the glass. What could I do? Against my better judgment, because I knew no human being could have been on the mountain top that night, I let him in.
In winter, the only entrance to the cabin is by using the outside set of stairs leading to the roof. I pointed towards the stairs, and he understood. I walked up to the rooftop door and opened it. He came through and said, "Thank you for being here and for allowing me in." We walked down to the living quarters with no further dialogue. I was still shaken and in disbelief that anyone could have somehow found their way to the top of Ragged Mountain. I led him to the kitchen and offered him a seat while I turned on the front burner of the LP gas stove and started a pot of coffee, percolated the old-fashioned way. Remembering that I was supposed to be delivering the local news, I dashed back to the studio just as the network broadcast was wrapping up. I flipped on my microphone and gave a quick station ID and pushed a button that started a 60-minute transcribed program. With mixed excitement and fear, I darted back to the kitchen to speak further with the impossible guest. He had taken off his winter coat, gloves, hat, and boots, and was dressed almost the same as me: flannel shirt, jeans, and moccasins. Looking around the room quickly, I thought it odd that I did not see where he had put his heavy coat. As we went in the living room to sit down and talk, I realized I had greatly exaggerated his height. He was actually almost the same as me, about 5'8". That wasn't too unusual, but I found it strange that he had a scar on his chin that was identical to mine. I mentioned it to him. Told him I got mine in a college wrestling match. He remarked that by coincidence, he acquired his in the same way. "Really?" I said. "What school did you go to?" "The same college as you," replied the visitor with a smile that was more a grimace than a grin. He looked at me in disgust, and with no provocation, sprang at me. As he flew towards me, I noticed that his face was identical to mine. The ferocity of his charge knocked me from my chair. Using my wrestling skills acquired in 4 years of high school wrestling, and 4 more at college, I took the attacker to the floor and tried to pin him. With amazing strength and agility, he countered my every move. As we grappled for a while, it became apparent to me that the intruder had skills that were the exact equal of mine. In fact, everything about him was identical to me. "Who are you?" I demanded as he twisted out of the half Nelson that I applied. He stopped for a moment. I too froze in place. We were like statues, with sinewy arms extended, trying to strangle each other. Still motionless, he snarled.
I am not you, but in a few seconds I will be you, and you will be a frozen stick in a snowbank.
As he spoke, his skin darkened. Millions of hairs began sprouting and spreading, weed-like, over his torso, which was also growing, at the rate of a foot every few seconds. In less than a minute, he had transformed into a 10-foot-tall, hairy, ape creature. The thing advanced towards me. I made a grab for an axe that I used to split wood for the fireplace. The gorilla-like monster tore it from my hands and grasped the end of the handle in one ham-sized paw and the blade in the other. Holding it high above his head like a trophy, he snapped it in two. Fear glued me to the floor. I couldn't run. I stood there waiting for death. The monster tossed the head of the axe away and jammed the handle in his mouth like an oversized cigar. With a loud grinding, he began chewing the wooden end. As easily as a man eating peanuts, he gnawed away at the axe handle. He extracted it from his mouth, revealing a perfectly formed wooden dagger. Lifting his hairy arm above his head, he prepared to plunge the weapon deep into my chest, where a blast of water hit him in the face. The behemoth looked wild-eyed and frightened. With a whimper, as streams of water soaked him, the beast collapsed to the floor. Dozens of tiny jets of tepid water kept drizzling down and whipped the beaten attacker into little more than a soaked rug. Water. The creature had been felled by water, just as gorillas in the wild are said to become immobilized by sudden rain showers and are unable to move even when being attacked by lions. You might ask me where the water came from. My coffee pot. I had lit the gas stove, as you'll remember. I put on the coffee, but then I forgot about it. Shortly after, the water boiled away, and the pot became overheated. The sensors in the cabin's alarm system thought there was a fire. The sprinkler system was activated and poured a rain of terror on the creature. By the time it transformed back into a human shape, I had my revolver trained on it. When it poised to attack me again, I had no choice but to empty my gun into it. Dragging the body to the roof, I pitched it into the snow. When the phone was back in service, I called the police department, and you said that you would get here as soon as the weather allowed. And now you are here. I'm glad you made it.
We were able to land today, but I'm not sure that we will be able to leave because the weather is worsening. We may have to stay here a while.
That's the chief of police of the tiny Maine town called St. Ange and the surrounding unincorporated villages. He had arrived in a chopper with the pilot and one of his deputies. While the chief was interviewing me in the radio studio, the pilot Jim Burrows and Jack Daly, the deputy, were in the kitchen having coffee and a sandwich. Almost before they had finished their meal, the chief came bursting into the room.
We're done here, boys. We have to leave now before the weather gets worse. I have finished the investigation. Nothing happened. The isolation of Ragged Mountain made the disc-jockey a little crazy. He's seeing things that are not really there. Get in the chopper now. We have to go right away.
Deputy Jack Daly had never seen the chief so jumpy. In the years they had worked together, they had faced down guns before, as well as rowdy gangs and professional mobsters. Chief Bert Daigle had never been as flustered as he was right then, after a 10-minute interview with a disc jockey.
Come on, Jack. Snap it up. We gotta go.
Okay, Bert. I will just be a second. You go on up those stairs, and I will be right behind you in a minute. I'm sorry, but you know I'm on that bladder medicine. I just have to use the bathroom for a few seconds, and then I'll be along.
Make it quick. Burroughs is going to start the helicopter right now. I will wait for you at the top of the stairs.
Deputy Jack Daly headed for the bathroom, but after the chief had started up the steps, he moved swiftly towards the radio studio and pushed open the door. There was a body on the floor. A wooden dagger made from an axe handle was protruding from the corpse's throat. Daly blinked his eyes and then blinked them again because he could not believe what he was seeing. The chief had been interviewing the disc jockey, but the dead guy on the floor was not the DJ. It was the chief himself. Daly went back to the kitchen and collapsed into a chair. "Jack! Let's go!" came the chief's urgent call, shouted from the top of the stairs. Daly pushed open his heavy coat and drew out his Smith & Wesson Model 35, which had served him well for more than 2 decades on the force.
I'm coming, Chief. I am coming. I am coming right now. I'm coming for you. Whoever you are, and whatever you are.
So ends the invasion of Ragged Mountain. Or is it the beginning? The invaders from the giant planets, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, did not send an armada of ships to conquer planet Earth. Just one solitary gas creature is all they will need. Just a single, solitary gas giant. One creature to a planet. Step to the rear of the bus, please. Along the starway of infinity there are billions of gas giants. But no life can exist in the Giants Federation or on any gas planets. Keep saying it. No life can exist on the gas giants. While you say it, keep an eye out for the gas man. This is Basil Nightingale speaking for Short Story Theatre. Today's play was written, produced and directed by Bill Russo, and is a copyrighted feature of our podcast and YouTube channel. Thanks for watching and listening, and please, come back again soon. Won't you?